welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne. I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Matt Jacob, a photographic artist known for capturing evocative and dynamic moments, draws inspiration from his diverse life experiences. Originally from England and now based in Bali, Matt's journey from a boy with a disposable camera and dreams of becoming a pilot to a dedicated artist have been shaped by profound challenges, including a cancer diagnosis at a young age. This pivotal experience taught him to embrace the beauty of fleeting moments and channel them into his art. Matt focuses on authentically portraying the complexities of human nature and the essence of diverse perspectives. He explores the why behind his subjects, weaving empathy and artistic intent into his photography. With travel playing a significant role in his creative vision, Matt highlights how new environments continually push him to grow as an artist. He reflects on the balance between personal passion projects and the demands of commercial work, emphasizing the importance of maintaining artistic integrity in a competitive industry. Matt's dedication to meaningful storytelling and continuous learning is evident in his approach to mentorship and his relentless pursuit of creating timeless snapshots that resonate with viewers. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Matt. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
G'day, Grant. How's it going?
Yeah,
That's
good.
my attempt at an Australian accent, but yeah,
Oh, you
thanks
did,
for having
did
me.
it pretty well for a Pom.
Oh, welcome.
So, speaking about that, where are you from and where are you now? Because I know that you're not in England, but I know you're from England. Tell us a bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I'm 100% Pommy. Unfortunately, I'm born and raised in England, full English heritage, but ironically never really connected with England or the UK in any way, mostly because of the weather is so bad. And
Bit like my wife, she's a Pom too. So,
oh, is she? Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right. Yeah, so look, throughout my childhood, and I was very privileged enough to have a very lovely and comfortable upbringing. We would go on family holidays, and there's always something about the glamour of not even a tropical destination like Mediterranean island or something like that, which is
Sure.
2 hour flight from the UK, but it mesmerized me, and I was always interested in travel and had the travel bug since I can remember. And that really drove me to A, travel, but B, to look elsewhere, other places to live. There were so many opportunities, and very fortunate to have opportunity when I reached late 20s to move abroad. So I moved to Hong Kong with a job I was in at the time, and lived in Hong Kong for just under 10 years until COVID
Mhm.
hit. And we took the leap then to come down to Bali, Indonesia. And Indonesia was high on my list for photography, but just for cultural experiences, cost of living. We knew a couple of people down here. Myself and my
Sure.
wife got married down here 5 or 6 years prior to that. So we kind of knew it. It was still Southeast Asia. We wanted to be in Southeast Asia, and we love it. We love being in this region, however close it might be to Australia. We still love it. So yeah, that's kind of yeah, my travel and where I've been living in the
All right,
last,
fair enough.
well, 15 years now. About,
Wow,
yeah.
okay. So, what does photography mean to you? What is it in your life?
It is fulfillment. There's a level of purpose and fulfillment I get with art generally, but picking up a camera and being comfortable in myself to create art, that there's something in it that's intangible, is unable to really define or explain. I know it's different for everyone, but I, like everyone else, I think it's impossible to explain what it means to me other than just saying everything. It's
Okay.
something that really gives me the chills, right? It's one of the only few things in life that can give me goosebumps when
Yeah.
when I do something I'm proud of, or when I make other people happy with it. So yeah, so is such a good question. I ask my guests that question as well, and it's so difficult to answer. But it's full of inspiration. I think I get inspired every day by other photographers, sometimes by my own work or my own ideas and concepts.
Sure.
And that's really motivating, right? If you're inspired by something and want to go and make something, it can be extremely powerful, motivated to get you off your backside, away
Yep.
from the TV, and just go and do something. So I think it really propels me forward in life through tough times and in the good times as well. Is
Do
that
you
as
remember
vague an
the?
answer as I could give you?
Oh, it's great. I love that sort of answer because there's so much to explore in it.
Yeah, yeah.
You remember the first photo that you captured that made you feel, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do now.
I do. I really, really do. And it's still one of my audience's favorite photographs because it was just so what's the word? Untouched almost. I wasn't
Yeah.
seeking perfection. I wasn't trying loads of different techniques. It was just me, another person in front of my camera who I didn't know, spent some time with. Actually, the photos on the wall next to me here, and this was 7 or 8 years ago now. I was in Uganda, and mainly just to travel. I just love going to places. I want to go and see the gorillas in the Bwindi forest. So I did that, and then I was like, oh, I'd tag on a few days just to, I was just getting into portrait photography and just learning. And what better way to learn than to just put yourself in the deep end on your own
Sure.
and try and just take some photos of people and see what comes. And I took a light with me. I took an artificial light with me because I was really interested in how to use it in the field and on location,
Mhm.
but I had no idea how to use it. I was just like, oh, this looks cool. And, put the softbox up and spent a few days taking people's photos and then managed to find a village and a family. And obviously I was, the only white guy for miles with a camera. And I was, spent the day with some of the local people where I was and managed to take some really nice portraits. And there was one girl that I really connected with, and we had a lot of fun. And she was no older than 10. I think at the time she was 8 or 9 years old. And she just had an interest in me in the camera, and we took photos together. She used the camera. It was just a really nice bonding moment for a few hours. And at the end of that, I got a portrait of her, and
Oh,
everything just came together. I don't know how. It was pure luck, but what came through that image was definitely the connection I had with her over such a
yeah, yeah,
short
yeah.
space of time. And that was, that lesson I carried through all portrait work. Now it's putting the hard yards in before you even pick up the camera.
Mm.
Really connecting, talking, getting to know these people, understanding, trying to understand them, trying to empathize with them, and that will, having faith that that will always come out in a better photograph.
Yeah, sure, sure. Do you ever look back across your portfolio and think, some of those, as you say, the moments when you weren't really sure if it was going to work tend to be the photos that you connect with more than the ones where you've set everything up, you've got everything, you've got control over everything, you know exactly how you're going to do it and how you're going to edit, etc. Do you find the happy accidents are the ones that you sometimes connect with more than the ones where you've got more control over what you're doing?
I would say 90% of my images are the unplanned ones,
Yeah,
or the plan B or plan C, right?
sure, sure.
Usually the and I don't know whether this is common with other photographers. I consider myself still relatively green in the photography space. I'm still learning so much. I don't do it full time as a full time photographer would. I do it regularly, but there's so much more for me to learn. So I don't know whether this is just because of my relative inexperience in the grand scheme of things. Most photographers I speak to that are nailing their books and their assignments are in the industry for 20 years. But to answer your question, yes, usually the idea I have for a photo doesn't come out as planned for many reasons. It just might feel and look different in the real world than it did in my head or on paper, or
Yep.
it could be an external factor I have no control over, whether the right person didn't turn up, or the person that I had in mind just didn't feel good in front of the camera, or the weather was bad, or technical issues, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say 90% of those first attempts at a concept don't work. But I've learned to embrace that. I learned to look, I'm going to try this, and knowing that, it's probably not going to be perfect or what I really wanted it to be. So I'm going to kind of give myself a bit of breathing space in that moment and just see where it goes,
Yeah,
especially with people where you can kind of, they're so volatile in terms of how they might be in front of the camera or what they're doing that day, what they're thinking, how distracted they are we really connected, blah, 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 blah. so many variables, it's easy just to kind of accept that the first attempt might not work, let it be, let it breathe, see how we can change things and just kind of capture them a little bit more naturally. Because, with shooting portraits, the first shot, you could spend hours getting them to relax. As soon as you put a camera in someone's face, those first that first hour or first 30 minutes of someone having their photo taken, they're going to feel not 100% relaxed and not 100% natural, even if
Sure.
they're in their own environment as well, which I try and do. Try and shoot as many people as I can in their own environment, whether it be their home or workplace or or somewhere in between. So yeah, it's just part of the part of my process anyway. I'm not so sure about other photographers, but part of my process just understanding that yeah, look, most of the time that first idea and that first attempt is not going to be as you thought it might.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a process for setting yourself creative challenges? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, I do. Most of it is once a month kind of self-review, looking back at where I was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 5 years ago with images and try not to be too embarrassed with my own work, which is, completely internal. And just understanding like what have I changed? What's different in my style or my voice? How do I want to move forward? And once I kind of figure that out, most of the inspiration comes from other artists. Most of kind of the creative challenges that you're talking about come from looking at other people and going, that is amazing. I'd love it. First of all, it's like jealousy. You go, oh, I can't do that. I wish I could do that. And then
Yeah,
realizing,
I
hang on a
wish
minute,
that was my photo.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then quickly snapped me going, hang on a minute, why can't I do that? I just have to figure
Yeah.
out how. It's almost like a magic trick. And I spoke to one of my one of my favorite artists as of this day. I didn't speak to him. I sent him a message the other day just saying, I love your stuff. I have no idea how you do it,
Mm,
but it's like a magic trick in that you're giving us the result. You're kind of showing on one hand and then giving on the other, and without us knowing how you've got from A to B.
mm,
And once I know the trick, how the trick is done, you'll just kick yourself, go, oh yeah, I could do that, no problem.
yeah,
So I kind of have to remember that, we're all human. We're all, talent is real, but we can all do what we put our mind to. And it's just a matter of fact of figuring it out most of the time. And then, okay, look, how do I want to, I'm quite a rational, logical person. How can I put this in a plan? What are we
mm,
going to do? What story am I going to tell and how am I going to do it? And really that storytelling part now with my work as I move into kind of the long form storytelling with series of images, that's the real creative challenge. That is really, really difficult. I haven't got to a point where I feel like I've got either a system or a conceptual process down with it yet. Every story is going to be different, but just knowing kind of where to start. And once you start these creative challenges, then you kind of let yourself go away with it.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's always different. It's always challenging, but I think it's really important to look at how far you might come and then seeing, okay, well,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that
what can I do
retrospect,
better?
yeah,
Yeah.
that retrospective looking back at your own portfolio and saying, all right, well, that was where I was 3 years ago. And I mean, occasionally
Not
you go,
fun.
yeah, you can still see, oh yeah, well that's actually a good image. I'd keep that in my portfolio today, but then there's
Yeah.
others where you just go, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no.
Yeah. What was I thinking?
What
Yeah.
was that?
Yeah.
The bit I sometimes struggle with is something that you talked about is that ability to actually look at it because that was your baby at the time and look at it passionately enough to say, okay, that is no good, and the obvious ones are the ones where you go, what was I thinking? But it's the ones where you kind of go, okay, well, that was actually the obvious shot. It's good. There's nothing technically wrong with it. It's okay, but it was a bit obvious. How do I then bring some other creativity into it, whether it's moving the camera to a different position or whether it's, coming back in different lighting or whatever for landscapes, etc. How do you sort of work in that sort of creative mindset where you're starting to say, okay, well, that's the obvious shot. I'll take it, but now I got to move on and I've got to actually look at something that's a little bit different. And how do you bring that difference to your work?
Really good question. And that's, that's linked to your previous question in terms of challenging yourself creatively, being aware of the fact that, I mean, I don't honestly don't believe there's such thing as originality anymore unless you
It's pretty
create,
tough, yeah.
you can't,
Particularly
I
in
mean, you
landscapes.
yeah. What is that? I mean, originality versus uniqueness is different. Like you can be
Yeah,
unique, you can stand out from the crowd, but whether
absolutely.
that's truly original, I don't think it exists because we're all influenced by everything, right?
Yeah.
Originality just is almost a dream, an illusion, because especially as artists, and we're looking at so many things more than ever now, we
Mm.
have the saturation of
There's
inspiration
also
just
so many different ways that you can do it.
of
You
course,
can
there's a
do it with
limited
a
number of ways you can do it.
yeah, but even so, there's many more now than there used to be in the history of photography. You've got
Yeah.
drones, you've got phones, you've got, a myriad of different cameras and lens choices that you can
Well,
you
with
can
the editing as well. I mean,
and then,
the
yeah,
world is
then
your
when you
oyster.
come to editing, everything that you can do there,
Yeah.
plus then you add in, all the AI tools, etc. It just, it becomes a very difficult thing to actually come up with, as you say, something that's original. Uniqueness,
I
on the
think,
other hand, is exactly the thing I'm trying to get at.
but I think you need, I mean, it does differ, I guess, depending on what genre you shoot in, but the common theme is that the uniqueness comes from who you are, right? There is no
Yeah,
other person the same as you. Even, okay, identical twins, very 99% similar, right? But still, every person on this planet is unique. And what we can bring to our photography and our art is us, the way we see the world, the way we want to put a spin on that message. And I think the real differentiator for uniqueness is finding a voice. And it sounds like a cliche, and it is a cliche, but finding something that you feel is important to you, that you want to shoot, and why. Asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why
yeah,
am I getting the obvious shot just because it's easy and I'm lazy? Or I just really love it and I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely, in love with that shot, even though it was the obvious one, because there was
yeah,
just something slightly unique to me about that shot. So I think, spending some emotional space and understanding, look, if I want to take this seriously, if I want to have a level of uniqueness to my work, I really have to know myself well, but I also have to understand how can I impart some of myself into what I'm outputting,
yeah,
into the work that I'm showing other people and showing myself. And that's really, really difficult. That comes with practice and learning and experience and going through life and having some wisdom and really kind of thinking, spending time thinking about what you want to do in photography. And now a lot of people might be listening to this and saying, well, I just want to take photos because I enjoy
yeah, yeah.
hiking and that's absolutely fine. But for those that want to take things a little bit more seriously and actually find that uniqueness, then I think there are deeper questions to ask and to think about and to answer for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's like here in Sydney, right? There's multi-million shots of the Opera House or the Sydney
Yeah.
Harbour Bridge here in Sydney, and I have shot them myself several times, and quite often from those very obvious places. But I'm also trying to look for, okay, conditions that are a bit unusual. Going there when there's fog, going there when there's a thunderstorm, going there when something, astronomical is happening, so that you can actually try and capture something that's a little bit unique and a little bit different. And
Absolutely.
also trying to find angles that are a little bit different, using a zoom and that sort of thing to just give you a part of the picture as opposed to giving you that.
I big on that. Like not just angles, but distances, right?
Exactly.
You mix in and think about images as a collection of images, even if it's two or three rather than just
Mm.
one. and you can tell more of a unique, maybe not story, but a little bit of a narrative and context.
Sure.
If you start learning how to pair photos together, even if it's the same subject, right? And like exactly like you're talking about, you can have a wide angle shot with atmospheric conditions of the opera house. It may not be original, but it might be slightly different. And then if it's paired with some close-ups or some still lifes that are like really right next to the opera house, or someone
Yep.
walking, or something interesting that is a once in a life moment,
Yep.
that's what makes that images, or that series of images, different and completely unique. So there's,
Mm.
subtle changes and subtle ways of thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your approach to photography as it relates to experience versus how that transcends into art? And I've got another follow-up question, which is sort of where did the art start? Where did you start to realize that what you were doing was artistic as opposed to recording?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I don't think there was any seminal moment in terms of remembering when that might have started, but again, genre
Some
specific, I
people
think
go out with the intent that that's where they're going to start, and I want to create art with it. Other people, it sort of, I'm documenting what I'm seeing or an experience and whatever, and then they
no,
move into.
I'm definitely on the art side. Before, I mean, I guess for the last few years, I've really been doing everything I can with pure intent. So with a very clear intent. It's like, what am I doing this for? Am I just practicing taking photos and practicing connecting with people, or am I trying to make some art, make this artistic? And therefore, it has to have meaning, and it has to drive curiosity, and it has to inspire. Well, has to, but that's the intent behind it, right? So you have a completely different mindset. And for me, I feel once I got the basics, the technical basics down, a big one for me in portraits and all photography was lighting, right? As soon as I got my lighting style down and how I like to separate subjects from environments, but also have context in the images, most
Mhm.
of which is to do with lighting and composition, how I like to light people's faces, soft, hard light, or angles of light, double light, single light, key light, backlights. How am I going to use the sun? How am I going to use environment, ambient, diffused light, room light, doorway light? Once I understood how those were used, and so it was second nature, that meant for me that I kind of achieved the 10% of photography that is just technical skills. Once I've got my technical skills as second nature, then if I really wanted to get more serious with being an artist in inverted comma marks
Yeah.
and being respected as a revered photographer at some point in my life, and be able to do my passion forever and create books and bodies of work that might be exhibited, then I have to think about it differently. I have to think, what
Mm.
story am I going to tell with these images, especially with the people that I shoot? What is the point of all this? What is the intimacy behind the people that I'm shooting, the places that I'm in, and the mirror that I'm holding up, that is the photo, right? What is the part of me that I want to express to the world? That is really where the art comes in, and that's really what fascinates me about photography. Because coming from a background of being a pilot, the technical skills for me, operating a camera is just easy. Like some people really find it difficult, and therefore have to
Yeah.
spend
Yeah.
a little bit more time focusing on that. So I was very lucky in that I picked up a camera and I kind of understood how the camera worked. It took a little bit longer to really see light. But I was quite comfortable and like, okay, is that it for photography? And then there was challenges of certainly dealing with people, and that's a whole art, more of a skill actually in itself. But if you get it right, it can become very artistic. So yeah, look, for me, the art comes with storytelling. For me, the art comes with, I mean, obviously, all my images, I probably won't show them unless I feel they look beautiful. So for me, they
Sure.
have to be aesthetically artistic as well as like philosophically artistic or metaphorically artistic.
Yeah.
And I guess there are gray lines across all of these areas, but that's the way I think about it. If I'm doing it with the intent to kind of showcase a narrative, then for me, the art will come from that.
You touched on a really good point there, and it's one that really resonates with me. Is that nobody's ever going to see my duds unless I want them to,
Yeah.
and the control that you've got in terms of how you portray your portfolio or how you portray your work is something that I think a lot of artists don't think about enough. It's not that I'm saying they're putting out rubbish or anything like that, but they that conscious choice when I go out and I take, 50, 100, 300 images, I'm then sitting there sifting through going, that one doesn't work, that one doesn't work, that one doesn't work. All right, that one I think I can work with. Let's give it a go, see how we go. I want to talk to you a little bit about the work that you do in terms of experimentation and how you look at the experiments that don't work. What are they to you, and what are those experiments telling you about yourself and about your work?
Yeah, I totally agree with you in what you said earlier. And I think curation is a huge part of the art itself. And that's okay. Like a lot of people, a lot of purists might think, well, that's why film is amazing, but even film is edited and film, the
Absolutely.
slides are curated and you're still selecting what you want to show. And that's a really enjoyable part or fulfilling part of creating art. You've got to think about what is art to you? What is the definition of art to you? How would
Exactly.
I want to see my work in a gallery? How would they all be pieced together and where's the consistency? Where's the theme?
Mm.
And that spreads across all genres. But yeah, in regards to your question about experimentation, yeah, I'm getting better. I shoot medium format digital as well as medium format analog. So for me, the process has had to slow down a lot. And this has
Yeah.
been for the last 4 or 5 years. When I started, I was shooting Sony A7R3, even Canon R5, and they just so, and I don't want to sound derogatory saying this, but they're just so easy to use, right? So you can just spray and pray. And so experimentation is not even thought of because you just well I'll get an array of photos and then I'll pick out the best one in the
Yeah.
edit,
Yeah.
right? Which I get. I think there's a beauty that's lost in the photography process because of that. But I didn't choose medium format because I wanted to slow down. I chose medium format because of the image quality,
Sure.
and I got to a point where I could afford a medium format digital because they're very expensive. That really allowed me to slow down and I can experiment less because I have this probably the same amount of time to work with and people are only patient for so long in front of my camera or behind them if I'm in with a team. So I
Yep.
have to be a little bit more careful with experimenting. But look, I make 9 out of 10 shots of mistakes. Not mistakes, but some of the mistakes, technical mistakes with focus or
Sure.
lighting or composition.
They don't work for whatever reason.
They don't work for whatever reason. And actually I teach this to people. It's like if when I'm going through my selections and when I'm doing that initial curation, I have to be in a place where I can just choose on my gut. A, because I don't want to spend hours going through 500 photos from a project. I want to do that in 30 minutes and just go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, because the gut I find with that type of experimentation, my gut is always right.
Yeah.
So and if my gut is always right within a second of seeing an image, then that's what I want with someone else viewing my image. I want
Sure.
them to be immediately intrigued within a second, right? So that's the way I do it and just understand that, in this digital world, I mean, like I said, even with analog, but mostly with digital, it's okay to experiment. And I think that's part of learning anyway.
Mm.
Figure out what works. And then you take some photos, look on the back of your screen. Oh, that didn't work. And so I can change it. I mean, how amazing is that? You can't do that with film.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a difficult process, but it depends on what you're comfortable with.
How do you define success in your photography?
I've thought about this for a long time, and I don't. But, well, I can tell you how I don't think about it, and that's with money or status
Yeah.
or anything that's superficial in that respect. I might have used to when I was younger and chasing dreams, but I know that plays no part in it. Having said that, I would love to be able to do full-time photography sustainably. And that means living a comfortable life where I can provide for myself, my wife, my dogs, and not struggle every month.
Yeah.
But that's becoming a diminishing. a diminishing kind of possibility, just generally with photographers. It's so
Yeah.
difficult to do that. So I would consider that success. But in terms of photography specifically, having having made a body of work, I can honestly look at the mirror in the mirror and say I'm truly proud of. That body of work might be a small body of work, it might be a book, or it might be 20-year process where I can look back and really truly say to myself, I've left some sliver of a legacy behind in my art. So it's a really again a vague answer, but I can't really I can't really quantify that for you other
Yeah,
than
sure.
it's a intimate feeling, I guess, to really get to the point where I go,
You-
okay, look, I've the body of work that I've created, I am proud of.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if we'll ever get there. I think that's, putting some insecurities aside, limiting beliefs and a bit of ego. But at some point, I'd love to be able to do that. And that doesn't mean like rest on my laurels. I'll always continue to want to create.
Mm.
But I think at some point, I'd love to have a book or an exhibit somewhere and I can say, look, I did this and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah. The success that you've had, how much of that would you attribute to your ability to communicate well? Because to me, the communication of our art in photography is very visual, which is to me a very human way of connecting with people. How do you think your ability to communicate the stories that you mentioned is attributed to the success that you've had?
I think contributed a lot. I think people when viewing photographs, they want to feel just a few things. They want to feel an initial spark of beauty. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of that's in aesthetics, but they also want to be intrigued. What is this about? Especially in portraits and photographing a group of people across a number of images or a
Yeah.
project, let's say. People like stories. People resonate with stories. If you're able to communicate to them a story, people love it, me included. That's why we read books, watch TVs, talk to other friends, tell me your stories, do podcasts. Like people resonate with stories. And so communication through either through purely a visual form or a bit of both. Like on my socials and on my newsletters, I will always pair images with a detailed caption or a poem or a paragraph about why I took this shot or a bit of context. So I
Yeah.
think I think that in the display of my images has been an important factor of whatever success I might have had, but also getting nice photos. I think again I bring it back to portrait photography just because that's what I know. Being able to get a nice photo of another human, I have to be able to communicate with them. I can't I can't be. I'm not an extrovert, but I'm not an introvert. I'm somewhere in the middle, but I have to be more of an extrovert when I'm with the camera and I'm trying to photograph people because I have to find ways to communicate that's
Mm.
gonna allow them to relate to me. A lot of these people don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, so I have to
Yeah.
be able to communicate why I want to do what I'm doing, what's in it for them, show them my work and be able to explain kind of this is the meaning behind what I want to do. This is my intent. Hopefully, I'm not detracting from them and their culture. And so, yeah, across the whole process, and I talk about empathy a lot, probably too much, but I think that kind of goes with communication as well. Empathy is a product of good communication. And if
Definitely.
I can communicate well, then yeah, I think the rest comes.
Mm. Fantastic. How do you think photography's helped you grow or change as a person?
Oh God, so many ways, so many ways. I think what we just talked about, empathy, it's definitely taught me to be so much more empathetic with people. And I think it would have been if I didn't go into portrait photography, if even if I was doing landscape or street or architecture, whatever it might be. I think at some point you have to understand who's viewing these photos. You have to understand
Yep.
yourself. So be empathetic with yourself. Like understand, well, why don't I like this? Why do I want to do this? Be empathetic with the people around you because you're always gonna bump into team members at some point, whether they're just one person or 100 people. And yeah, in my field, I have to be empathetic with the people I'm trying to shoot, mostly with them. So it's really, I've had to learn to be more empathetic, communication skills that we talked about, just generally a little bit more humble, I think,
Yeah.
understanding, just being aware of my ego. I mean, I used to just run into shoots and think it was all about me. I have to get these shots. These are my photos. I didn't think like this, but just to put it basically, you're just a subject, right? I'm
Yep.
I'm the photographer, and I'm here to get work for me. I'm here to get photographs for me. And I quickly realized, obviously, that's not gonna A, give me a good reputation, but B, resonate with any meaningful art. Yeah, having a little bit more humility in across the whole scope of the photography process I think I've got better at anyway. I think that's what's
Nice.
really, really changed.
Brilliant. You talked a little bit about it not being a full-time gig at the moment. Want to talk a little bit about, obviously, the financial side is one of the main things holding you back. What else would be holding you back? But I'm also interested in how you balance the rest of life with your photography life.
Yeah, I think finance is a big one. I want to stay true to what I want to photograph. I have had this rebellious side of me since I was young. I don't know why. I don't like being told what to do. So working for clients or for other brands, I just don't like it. Mainly because my creative voice is stifled a little bit. Now I want to be able to create for me, not just for me, but you know what I mean, like create what I want to create, and knowing
Mm.
that other people are hopefully going to like it. So that's really kind of limited my financial options. But I also, I probably give equal amount of time to my podcast, which, as you know, is almost around the clock commitment and amount of work to kind of make it work. So
Yep.
I think I still put that under the photography umbrella. Now, we talked earlier about
So do I.
yeah. So I've
That's
had
what it's
to
all
I
about.
diversify. Like I do loads of stuff in the photography arena that isn't me taking photos.
Yeah.
Most of my photography is personal passion projects. How I fund that is through I still work part-time as a pilot. So
Okay.
I still that kind of pays for most of the operations, or I do collaborations with, if I'm lucky, with sponsors or travel companies that might be able to cover my costs, or at least some of the costs, in order to travel to
Yeah.
these places. And then I figure out a selection of images they might want to use. But rarely do I get paid for brand deals or client jobs, because I just don't want to do them. Plus, my style of photography is quite niche, so it's not something that I want to dilute to kind of appease a brand. That being said, I have had podcast sponsors looking to maybe add communities, around the podcast space that
Yeah.
can be paid for very little. I do mentorship. I also do the odd workshop, which I want to increase doing. I love the education side of it. I love just talking about photography and understanding other people's experiences and challenges and difficulties. Because I remember when I went through it and I was completely lost, and I didn't really have YouTube to fall back on. I didn't have a mentor, and I didn't go to school for it. I kind of wish I did, but I
Yeah.
didn't. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to kind of immerse myself in the photography world and build, small little financial rivers out of it,
Mm.
which will hopefully one day be grow enough to, especially with the podcast, hopefully one day grow enough to provide a sustainable stream of income.
Yeah.
And then yeah, with the rest of life, we have another business here in Bali. My wife works hard on just helping everything she can with me in the photography, especially with the podcast. So yeah, we enjoy the normal stuff that most people enjoy when living in Bali and living by the ocean. And we've got 4 dogs, so we enjoy being outside with them. And many, many times I've got that balance wrong. Many, many times I've done 30 days in a row, full days of working, because I love it. Or something's kind of gone wrong and I need to fix it, and I'm the only one that can fix it. And then you spend, and then the other things get pushed back, and then you've
Yep.
got to catch up with them and you've made commitments for this and blah, 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 blah. And you know what it's like, right? It's the thing with photography is that you are self-employed. And if you don't get money coming in, you don't get money. There's always this at the back of your mind, like, well, if I don't work tomorrow, that's another day guaranteed that I'm not going to get any income. So why would I not work tomorrow to try and get income? Because I don't know where the next paycheck's coming from. It's not like employment where you always know, certainly in the West, you've got a few months termination notice, worst case, right? Unless you're sacked and even then it's difficult to sack people these days. So it's a very different way of thinking about it, right? So it's difficult to avoid burnout. It's difficult to find that balance between sitting in front of the TV or having a break and going away for 2 nights, just reading a book and walking. Because what I've learned, now I'm 42, I've really learned the hard way that even if I took 2 days off, that's a better 2 days spent than trying to work through those 2 days, because I know I'll come back completely invigorated, refreshed. I would have had those 2 days with ideas and journaling concepts and stuff like that. So I've just learned that the hard way. But the balance is always a challenge.
It's always difficult. I don't know anyone that's actually cracked it or has a system for it.
So what about you? How do you manage it?
How do I manage it? Basically, as you say, if there's no work, there's no money coming in. So you just keep chugging away and plugging away, and even on some of the down days, and I mean, I'll sometimes sit up till 1 in the morning or whatever, writing emails. I don't necessarily send them at 1 in the morning because I like to reread those before I send them. But writing emails to potential clients or old clients that have bought work or done I've worked with in the past, and just trying to find that sort of thing. Like you said, I want to circle back to your podcast in a bit, but I've actually, funnily enough, I've laid off doing workshops because I'm looking at doing something a little bit different to what I was doing in that space, and so I'm just taking the time to actually, and the time taken in planning and setting them all up, basically I found was taking away from the ability to actually rethink the whole thing. So that's kind of where I am at the moment. But yeah, I mean, other than that, yes, it's really about spending time with family. I turned 60 a couple of weeks ago, so coming up for the official retirement age, if you like. But I've actually been retired from my previous career. I was in IT now for about 3 years and been doing this full time. And a lot of it is about just juggling, going and trying to find clients, trying to find work and getting stuff done as much as possible.
Well, like we were talking about before we started recording, you and I are very similar in the way we want our podcasts to be regular, even over festive periods. And that means, like, you're going away soon, right? When we go away, and I travel quite a lot as well, we have to kind of bank the episodes prior to going away, which means we're just working harder before we have time off. It's almost counterintuitive, but that's the way, as anyone out there who's self-employed or has their own business, that's the way you have to be, right? Yeah.
I will circle back to the podcast in a minute, but first off, you talked about the mentoring and education side of things. Talk to me a little bit about how that started for you and how that's going for you, and what sort of things that you're doing in that space.
Well, it's going slowly. It's a price point that people struggle with because it's one-on-one mentoring, and to make mentoring effective in any way, it has to be over a certain period of time minimum. Absolutely. Otherwise, you're just
you can't do 3 hours in a day and that's it. Yeah.
No, it's like, oh, good luck. So it's more of a premium service that's few and far between in terms of clients, which is absolutely okay. I'd rather give 3 or 4
and more.
And I've only been doing it for just over 6 months, so I'm still learning how to do it the best way possible. But that came about really 2 ways. One, it was kind of an answer to your question previously, like how can I monetize photography without kind of, working under someone else's brief? And I really enjoy the giving back side of things. And, I'd get messages for the last 5 or 6 years on Instagram or emails, and even people here might stop by the studio and just ask simple questions like, what camera should I get, right? Or
Yeah.
what lens, what settings did you use on this image? And, where are you shooting? Really like basic questions that I don't think should be the questions that beginners or hobbyists should be asking, right?
Yeah.
So I was like I got to stop this myth about equipment being the answer to people with better photography for a start. That kind of snowballed into an online course, which I just completed like back end last year. And then off the back of that, I wanted to mentor. So for that reason, to kind of diversify the financial side of things, but really to plug a gap where I experienced a lot during my learning process. I was desperate for a mentor. I think I experimented maybe with 10 different mentors in the photography
Yeah. Wow.
space in my, 2 or 3 years of just kind of learning photography, and didn't really connect with any of them. And those that I did, they just didn't really have the time for me. And
Mm.
I really wanted, I still do. I want a mentor until I die, right? I want someone that isn't a best friend, but someone who's kind of somewhere in the middle between friend and guide or coach or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
that can just guide me through. Like if I have a question, any of the questions that we've talked about today, or, what project I'm thinking about doing this project next, and this is roughly how I want to go about it. What do you think? Where can I make this better? Or what challenges have I not seen? To be able to put that into someone else's eyes and get their input is, for me, so invaluable, because this is an individual sport. Photography is, you're on your own, and sometimes it's extremely lonely, and you
Yeah.
have to make decisions you just don't know are right or wrong. You just have
Mm.
to make a decision.
Yeah.
And you know that if you had a bit of context and you bounced ideas off someone else,
You
then
might
you
make a
might
better
get some
decision.
clarity. Yeah, you might make a better decision, or you might 90% of the time, I will be told something I never even thought of. Go, oh yeah, that's a really great idea, but my
Yeah.
brain didn't think of it. Which I just, putting ego aside, I think that's a great thing. Like
Oh,
I
absolutely.
don't know why no one else would want that. So I was always desperate for that, and so I thought, look, I want to be able to try and be that person for someone, whether it's one person or 1,000, and make a difference. And make a difference where I felt I needed someone to make a difference for me. So that's
Mm.
kind of where that came from.
Nice. Yeah. One of the things I've found quite rewarding, as you say, in terms of mentorship, is working with some of the local adult education institutions around here, and talking to them about not necessarily being a photography teacher in there, but being an external mentor that students could actually come and approach, and
That's a good idea.
having them do a portfolio review at the very
Yeah,
minimum, and sort
yeah.
of saying, okay, well, this works, and this works. That doesn't. Here's why.
Mm,
And actually working through them, through their portfolios with them, to give them a bit of guidance. And I know in our system anyway, there's certainly quite a quite a strong push to get people to network in the industry and get people talking to one another, because there's so many opportunities to learn what it's really like from
hmm.
somebody that's actually doing it, as opposed to the theoretical in classroom. And I know photography in classrooms probably a little bit different, because there'll be lots of field trips and so forth, but you're also only going to get, if you're only listening to, one or two people giving
Yep.
you a lecture about what it is that they're doing, that's all you're going to hear. And unless
Yeah.
you actually network and find a range of voices, you're not necessarily going to find the I guess the advice that works for you. And what
Totally,
you were
totally
saying
agree.
there really resonated, and that to me is vitally important for somebody that's actually learning photography today, to get out there and actually approach people. Don't be afraid, because okay, you might run across some people that are assholes. You're going to find that in
Oh,
any
definitely. Yeah.
walk in life, right?
Yeah.
But 90% of the people that I've spoken to in professional photography are more than happy to share, you know, their time and their knowledge and their experience with somebody because they're passionate about it and they're passionate about
Mm.
handing that information on.
And it's vital, right? There's nothing that
Totally.
frustrates me more than people gatekeeping
Ah,
information, which we know is not their information. You know, we talked
no,
about this
that's
earlier.
it.
You're not original. You've
No.
had your own teachings from other people. You've had your own
Yeah.
inspirations from
Where
other
where did
people.
you learn it?
Yeah,
Oh
where did
no.
you learn it? It's
Yeah.
just ridiculous.
That's exactly it. And whether even if you are, in inverted commas, self-taught, through YouTube or whatever, the people that have actually spent the time putting that information together on YouTube
Exactly.
that's where you learnt it,
Yeah.
So as you say, you're not original.
Well, and at the end of the day, look, what do we not want more beautiful art in the world?
Absolutely.
Yes. So, just because it might not come from you, get over it. So
Exactly.
yeah, I agree. And I think actually when I was in Hong Kong when I started learning photography and I didn't resonate with any type of photography community there. There were photography clubs, but and I'm going to try and say this politely, but they were just a bit too geeky for me. It was very equipment
Sure.
based. It was like, what lens and what a camera have you got? I'm like, well, I just want to go out and figure out what your process is and why. So I didn't really kind of connect with those types of formal organizations, but I also felt there wasn't really like a community vibe. And I know there is in many cities around the world, which is great to see. And I think that's why a lot of people turn to social media as well. They can find a bit more of a community there, even though it's not in person. So I was big on trying to find, my belonging in the photography world. And so that's why when I kind of stepped out of the learning phase, I mean, I'm always learning, but the kind of the initial formal learning phase, I wanted to, once I had some work behind me, I wanted to kind of create that, even if it's just for me. And that's really where the podcast came from as well 2 years ago. Like you talk about networking, man, I wanted to network. Just wanted to meet other photographers and hear what they had to say.
Yeah.
And actually, the podcast has probably been the best networking tool I've ever experienced. Not
Same
in a
here.
kind of, not in a take,
No, 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 no.
strategic way, just like I'm meeting amazing people week in, week out, and opportunities come about, or just tips and tricks. Oh, you've done it that way, and
Yep.
we do it exactly the same way. It's nice to connect and realize, oh yeah, I'm not crazy because other people do things that way or think about things that way as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've said this before to people that I've spoken to on the podcast. This has been pretty much like I'm into my fourth year now. It's been like a 3 year or three and a bit year university education in photography
Yeah,
without
yeah,
actually taking any photos
yeah, for free.
for free. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, from some of the best photographers in the world, in my case, some of the people that I've spoken to have had long and storied careers that I've envied because they're the National
Mm.
Geographic photographer or whatever that I'd always wanted to be back when I was a kid. Funnily enough, I don't want to be that now. Talk to me a little bit. You mentioned meeting people was one of the reasons. Why start the podcast? What was it about? What is the podcast about? So that people that are listening can find it and connect with you.
Yeah, so it's about all forms of art. Photography is the underlying theme. That's, I'd say 70-80% of my guests are photographers.
Mhm.
I want to kind of change that. I want it to be more areas within the art world or more areas within photography world, not just photographer, right? So
Oh,
I
sure.
actually spoke to, a photojournalist lecturer the other day,
Okay.
which is great because you just see a completely different side of the industry and a
Mm.
completely different take on teaching photography rather than learning it or
Yeah.
experiences with clients that we may never have expected. So yeah, yeah, I mean, to put it simply, it is a photography first podcast. I get as many guests on as I can, either in the studio here where I'm sat or online like we're doing. And it started probably the same way it started with you. I actually started it in COVID on Instagram Live when I was
Okay.
still in Hong Kong, and it was purely an experiment. It was purely and it was 100% born from not having a photography community to be involved with. So I wanted to just learn. I really just wanted to, what am I not getting in photography that a community can provide me?
Mm.
And so I just started reaching out to people I knew at the time and just doing like 30-minute Instagram live conversations, which were a nightmare because Instagram live was really bad, so many technical issues, and it wasn't
It
really the
didn't really
platform I
work
should.
that well,
But
but
it allowed me to just see if I was any good at hosting a conversation, see what the challenges were going to be. I mean, it's a skill in itself, as you know. It's very difficult to keep a conversation flowing with many different types of personalities all the time.
yeah,
And that was a really cool challenge for me. And in the end, it wasn't meant to be something that I was going to really enjoy. It was just like an interesting experiment, but I really enjoyed it. And the feedback I got from, maybe at that time, I maybe did 20 guests, if that, maybe 15. Most of them gave me good feedback. Said, look, it's good. I think, you're good at hosting, and maybe this is something you want to think about doing more. So when we moved to Bali, I wanted a portrait studio. I mean, cost of living here was so much cheaper than Hong Kong, so we
oh,
had a budget to rent a studio. I was like, well, of course I want to go and rent a studio to take photos in. And
mm,
then when we found somewhere, it happened to have 2 floors. I was like, oh yeah, I could really just try this podcast thing that I've been wanting to do for the last few months. And that was it. I'd never looked back. I loved every minute of it. Now the edit, I chose to do video as well from day one. And I'm glad I did because it's taught me so much. But it's been, those first 50 episodes were a really steep learning curve,
yep,
both with hosting, researching, finding guests, just managing those types of logistics, but also with the production side of it and post
yeah,
production. So yeah, that kind of, now I think we're 80 odd episodes in, and he's still loving it. And now it's got to the point where it's, can we take this? Can we take this on? It costs me money to operate, so I have to
mhm.
think, how can I cover those costs as we grow? So, maybe by the end of the year, we'll think about monetizing it somehow. But for now, it's still just pure enjoyment. So, yeah, hopefully people can tune in.
Yeah. Well, you definitely won't make a great deal of money out of the advertising monetization.
No.
I think in the 3 years I've probably just about cracked $100.
Oh, crikey. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not expect. I mean, yeah, I'm not expecting much from the audio advertising side of it. I think sponsors
Yeah,
is one way
getting
of doing it,
sponsors is a good way of doing it.
or subscribing, or going down the paywall.
Yeah, going down the paywall route.
Avenue.
I personally am not a fan of that. That's just me. And
Mm.
but I get people that have special Patreon editions or whatever. All power to them. I haven't got the time or inclination to do extra bits on top of what I'm already doing,
Yeah,
and
well, that's the thing. It's just
you
more of a
know,
commitment, isn't it?
and yeah, exactly. And then chopping this up into smaller, shorter, more digestible chunks just to me doesn't make sense. The whole thing
Mm.
about what I'm trying to do with this is it's a conversation, and if I chop it up, then the conversation starts to lose context and lose the sense
I
of
don't know whether you have to
that
like change
connection.
the podcast itself. It's just
Yeah,
it's more of a matter of maybe what else you can add that they can
maybe.
get value from, whether that's BTS, if you are doing a video, or articles about it, or post interview conversations, or
Yeah,
something completely different, right? Tips and tricks that you might get, or questions. I saw a podcast the other day, and this was seemed like a good approach. They did the full conversation, no edits, no cuts. But at
yeah.
the end, they said, well, now the conversation's over. We're going to ask questions from our Substack subscribers.
Okay. Yeah.
But for the free version, that was kind of the end of the podcast. And then for the
Yeah.
paid
Yeah. Yeah.
version, they got to see their questions being asked to the guest, which I thought
Yeah.
was quite a good way
That's
of doing it. But
not a bad way of doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
there are ways, but it's something I'm going to look at. It's something I'm going to
Yeah.
maybe research a bit more.
Yeah. I've had a bit of a think about different ways of trying to monetize it more, but to be honest, I'm not that worried personally about that. To me, the connection and the conversations are really what it's all about.
Absolutely.
It's not all about making money. And if I can help somebody else's career or help somebody else's profile or whatever, then great.
That's the danger with monetizing anything, right? Whether you're
Exactly.
monetizing photography, your business, podcast, whatever it might be,
Mm.
you don't want to take your eye off the ball. You don't want to take
Yeah.
the eye off
Why
the
are you doing
reason.
it in the first place? Comes
Exactly.
back to what you were saying
Exactly.
about photography. Why am I
Yeah,
taking this shot? Why am I doing this podcast?
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm
It's
doing it
always
because I
about the
love
why.
doing it. I love having the
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah. And if you can still love it exactly the same amount, but find a way to monetize it, brilliant. But that's
Great.
like the holy grail, right? Like how it's just it's just so difficult. Just give up.
No,
No
I've got
way.
too many
Never.
people to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good for you. It's
I've
fantastic.
got 5 episodes next week to record, so
Wow. Nice.
I'm interested in. We've been going for quite a while now, a bit over an hour, so we need to think about wrapping up, but I'm not ready to wrap up quite yet.
No
I'm
worries.
interested in how people think about photography in society. It's one of the questions which I ask everyone now. I didn't start off asking this one, but I'm just interested in how photographers see photography in society.
Really good question. I think it's changing every day. I still 100% believe photography has a really powerful place in society because I think we take it more for granted than we ever have done as a general public
Mm.
because we see images every day. When we forget
Yeah.
we see images every day, right?
Yeah.
It's just become second place. Now it's a matter of questioning whether those images are real or not, which is a little bit of a shame. But you know, I think I try to simplify things because my brain is relatively simple. I have to kind of compartmentalize. And I look at here where I live, there are a lot of young photographers, incredible photographers, but they see the photography, the place of photographs and photography in society in a completely different way
Mm.
that I do. And I probably see it different than maybe the generation above me. The youngsters here, they see photography as a means to get followers.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily see it as something that can be life changing to
Wow.
people out there.
Yeah.
They see it as a way to, and quite rightly, they're grown up with social media and devices and the complete digitization and homogenization of photography to some respect. So and they get rewarded for it. They put all their photographic attention into social media, say, which turns into followers, which turns into fake validation, but also in a lot of the cases, money. So
Yeah.
they end up creating a business out of social media, essentially.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, their photography is it's just like, yeah, it's good, but it doesn't really mean anything. And I realize I'm throwing a whole generation under the bus there, and I'm not saying they're all the same, but that's my experience in my own circle. For me, there are there are certain parts of photography that I think we're going to have to say goodbye to just because of the impact of artificial intelligence. That's just the way the world goes.
Yep.
But it's also lovely to see the power of analog photography coming back and people experimenting with film and understanding that
Mm.
their enjoyment of photography is as much in the process as it is in the final version of that
Absolutely.
image.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, photography and its place in society, it will always have a place. It will always be there for us to resonate with. It will always be it will always have this kind of potential energy to really inspire people, and I've seen it more than ever actually. I've asking myself that question certainly in the AI boom 3 4 years ago, and when kind of that really entered our lives with Mid Journey and large language models and NFTs, is photography dead? But I've seen more exhibitions than ever. I've seen more photographers wanting to print their photos and sell prints, which is fantastic.
Mm.
So that's shown me that photography really still has such a strong place in society still. And I see AI and the other external and future threats to photography having an impact, but certainly not necessarily diminishing the power of photography. Now, on the business side of things, yeah, I think we touched upon this already, but I think businesses do have devalued and do devalue photography even more. There's
Totally.
more, there's so much more competition for a start. So businesses and brands and companies that want photographs, they can choose from stock image, they can choose from AI, they can choose from a handful of photographers that have been doing something so specialized for many, many years, or they can go out into the field and get a young photographer who's happy to do things for free and take
Yeah.
that risk. And everything else in between. So they just think images are just images. Whereas I think 30, 40 years ago, or even less, 20 years ago, they still valued the photographer and the
Yeah.
photographer's skill and the photographer's artistic vision. I don't think they do so much anymore.
I'd agree with you there. The commercialization and the fact that everybody is a photographer now just sort of has dissipated that. I mean, it was quite lucrative for some people, but I don't think it's ever been massive income stream for anyone. I don't know too many billionaire photographers out there, other than billionaires that then decided to pick up photography. But I think that point about the devaluation of it in marketing and travel companies, etc., is really sort of one of the things that a lot of people have struggled with over the last, say, 5, 10 years, where the rise of free imagery has sort of come about.
Yeah, I got sent an email, and I'm always welcome brands emailing me, but they offered, I'm not going to give names away, but they offered their product or a test of their product that was for consumption, a pack of their products for
Yep.
free, obviously, and then $50 to give some photos of me, of these products, right? I was like, I felt they left a few zeros off the
Yeah.
off the quote. So I wrote back, said politely, "Do you mean $50 for some images?" I couldn't believe it. I was like,
Yeah.
almost the audacity of, but that's the norm. They're either really trying to test, or and a lot of brands don't do that and they realize the value of it. But
Yep.
like you said, there's just so many, and whether you think it's right or wrong, photographers doing things for free, I I I just don't know, but they know they can go and get people for very cheap or for very free, and if someone says no, they just go to the next one. There's
Yeah.
enough out there that are willing to do it.
What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's ever given you?
The best piece of advice I still remember to this day was a technical piece of advice in photography, and it was the best because it was the most simple and most digestible, and it gave me a light bulb moment when I was learning photography, and I was on a workshop in Mongolia. This is six years ago now, I think.
Mm.
And I just was enjoying kind of taking photos of people, didn't really know what I was doing with light. And put a long story short, we were in an enclosed room with one of the locals who we were kind of staying with at the time. And I had managed to second one of the two professionals that were running the workshop for like 10 minutes because everyone wanted his attention. So he was kind of going around different
Sure,
people.
sure.
And I just said, like, just tell me about light. And he took this photo of these people. I was like, why does that look so different to mine? And the room had one door, and the light was very diffused. We're in Mongolia, so very high latitude, so the sun doesn't get that high, and it was winter, so it really doesn't get that high. You had this beautiful, soft kind of winter light, and it was kind of coming through the door, and I couldn't see it. I was so kind of novice at that time. I just didn't really know what I was talking about. But he just literally opened and closed the door for me. But instead of looking at the light coming through the door, I was to look at the light on the person's face and notice shadows and the basic stuff. And literally, like, the degrees of which he opened that door cast a completely different, obviously light, but cast a completely different feeling in the image.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like, that's incredible. So all I need now is a door in every room. That was just one seminal moment in my learning process, which took 10 minutes. And I will never forget it because I can always go back to that. Natural light, free, available, and I can adjust it how I want to adjust it. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, then I kind of went off with all the different, other techniques and equipment. So that was the best bit of technical advice I'd ever given them, have ever been given. I've had other bits of advice about kind of how to, I guess, be a little bit more emotionally intelligent with the people that I'm shooting, but that was that thing in Mongolia with the light really, really kind of changed my life in terms of photography for sure.
Fantastic.
Worst piece of advice. Worst piece of advice. Well, I've had maybe not photographers, but I've had a lot of people wanting to run my social media, and I when I was kind of giving my social media attention a couple of years ago and deciding again with intent, okay, look, how am I gonna kind of make some money out of photography, but in the way I want to expose my photographs? How can I grow on social media? It was the time when the likes of Instagram were bringing in reels, and that still images when you couldn't grow anymore, they weren't going to get any attention, and that arguably still is the case. And so I knew that I kind of had to do something different. And for all photographers went through that. They couldn't just post their photos anymore and hope to grow. And I employed a marketing agency, and they completely basically ripped apart my artistic integrity. And I let them do it, and they wanted me to do educational chats. They wanted me to post photos that weren't necessarily my photos. They wanted, and I did, 6 months of that, and I just lost my way and lost kind of,
Yeah.
I just started not enjoying what I was doing, and it might help me grow on social media, and it did, but not for what I wanted to be known for, and not that
Yeah.
I knew would be long consistent over the long term because I didn't want to do it. So that was kind of to the worst piece of advice I got, and but I was very influenced by other people back then, less so now. So yeah, maybe I can't think of anything specific worst advice in a photography aspect, but that
It's
was
pretty good
definitely
bad advice.
yeah, it was really bad advice. But I learned my lesson, and so there's something good that came out of it. I'll never let that
Yeah.
happen again, and I would encourage everyone out there who does want to grow, whatever it might be, but in this case, social media, to not dilute any part of your artistic integrity and what you want your photos to be, or what you want you to be showcased as, and
Yeah.
what you want to say. Just that there are always ways to find the best way of doing it that will help kind of the audience really understand who you are. So
Fantastic.
yeah, that was definitely a bad piece of advice.
Well, I've only got two more questions for you. One is, are there any landscape photographers out there that you think I should get on the podcast?
If there are, I would need to think about it. Back at Ian Plant's a good landscape photographer. I
Yeah. I've
enjoyed,
seen his work. Yeah.
yeah, I had him on the show a couple of months ago, and he was really nice to talk to, and does some great work. Yeah, I was going to say Ansel Adams, but I guess you can't have him on the show.
I'd struggle to talk to him, I think.
I don't think I've had many landscape photographers on the show, and if I have, I'd have to go back, and I've had a few travel photographers on the show, people like Jord
Yeah.
Hammond who do just incredible work and used to do a lot of landscape photography. But a lot of these photographers, it's funny, isn't it? But photographers kind of fall into certain brackets within the platforms they are known for. And I
Yeah.
just mentioned Jord Hammond. He's got just under 1 million followers on Instagram, but maybe he's not known to kind of the contemporary landscape photography. He's in that kind of social media generation that I talked about
Yeah.
earlier. It's funny how people kind of fall into that. And then a lot of the older generation don't really didn't really put the time into social media, or don't really enjoy it, and so they don't use it, but are very well known for their work in books and exhibitions and galleries and magazines
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So it's very difficult to kind of span across all those types of
Definitely.
platforms.
Definitely. My last question is one that I've trying to be try. My last question is one I've tried to get to the bottom of since the beginning of the podcast. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No, do not put pineapple on pizza, please. No Hawaiians.
Fair enough.
Just just meat and cheese. Done.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Very.
no, I've never been. I don't like it, like fruit in salads. Don't put fruit in salads. Like fruit on pizza. No,
I don't mind a salad with a mandarin slice in it.
no.
Yeah.
Savory. Come on. Is that an Australian
Yeah.
thing?
I don't. Well,
Um,
yeah, we put pineapple on our hamburgers, so definitely.
what?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
If you come to Australia and have a burger with the lot, right? So that's my standard burger. I grew up with it, and if if you get it from the right sort of place, it doesn't have one of those fancy greasy brioche buns. It's a white bread bun, preferably with sesame seeds, and in between there you've got your meat patty, you've got cheese, which is preferably melted so that it wraps around the top of the patty. You've got caramelized onion, can't be raw. You've got lettuce, tomato, a slice of tinned beetroot, and a slice of pineapple, and barbecue sauce.
Beetroot and pineapple.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous. Can you even taste the meat?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I can see you've thought about this a lot. I mean, yeah. What is the majority? Have you ever taken a poll, like of all your guests?
I still haven't.
What do most people say?
I keep promising to do that, but I still haven't
Yeah,
actually gone back and gone through and done the
that'd be
numbers.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Probably would.
yeah. I'm a
Oh,
pepperoni. Like, if I have a pizza, it's pepperoni. That's it.
pepperoni. Yeah,
Yeah, done. Pepperoni pizza. I'm a happy boy.
brilliant. Well, it's been really wonderful meeting you and getting to know you, Matt. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you as well. Thank you, Grant. People can find my work on my website, mattjacobphotography.com. And then all my socials are the same handle. It's at Matty J with a underscore between the J and the A. So yeah, I'm sure we can link that in the description anyway, but
Yeah,
hopefully people can just kind of navigate their way from there. I mean, Instagram is kind of my main social platform, even though we
yep,
post across other stuff. But yeah, website and Instagram, and you can find everything else from there.
brilliant. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Don't forget to like and subscribe, really helps the channel. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.